Welcome to another episode of our Personal Empowerment Premium Audio Series, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder. And our program today is entitled Intentional Intuition. Now, we all know we have this thing, this intuition. We call it a hunch or a feeling or a sense that something's going to happen. But intuition is something you can actually intentionally utilize. You can purposely use this amazing intelligence. For example, you can ask yourself, is there a better way of doing this thing that I'm about to do? Intentionally using your intuition, exercising it. That's what today's program's about.
Intuition can arrive in a variety of ways. It could just be a feeling or a sensation in your body. Might be a voice or a sound in your head, seemingly. Or lots of folks just see pictures, they get flashes. I think probably the most common archetype for intuition is the visual of light itself, as in enlightenment, or enlightened, or illumined, or illuminated. And the whole idea is whether it's the dawning of a new idea, you get the idea coming up real slow here, or the light bulb popping on as a symbol of a great idea, or literally being thunderstruck like the top of your head is ripped off and you're blinded by the revelation, this epiphany of, oh my God, eureka, right? The aha illumination, I have found it. But again, whether it's a visual or an auditory or a sense in your body, Steve's right. The tendency is to think that this is something that happens to us sometimes and that we're a victim of our most creative self. And that, we think, is identifying with the wrong end of the bar magnet. That's not the self you find in paradise. That's the doubting Thomas self, the critical self you've been dragging around all of your life. I am a victim of my best nature. I sure hope it's done to me. Well, what if you identify with the other end of the pole? What if you are the part that breaks through and could have access to that on demand? And in fact, normally and naturally you do, except normal has become not so natural. So bottom line, we're all too highly stressed, overstimulated to have routine access with the intuition, but you can still access it. And access intuition on demand, that's what we're talking about. Form the intuition as if you can go get it anytime you want to think again.
Intuition is really easily identifiable. It's the first thing that pops into your mind. Before you have a chance to think or cognate or figure anything out, you've got this hit, this intuitive, as Michael said, a picture or a feeling or words or sounds or something. It's just there. And it's a direct conduit to feelings. It's like before there's a chance to put it all together into words, it's just, this is the sensation. This is the sense. And intuition, where you can't say it's always right, but it's sure often right. It's certainly worth listening to. It's certainly worth checking it out and seeing it. It's got a really high percentage, it's oftentimes right. So one of the things you can use your intuition for, is to just find ways to get better. And whatever it is you do that you do poorly, you can learn to shore up your weaknesses, those things that you do average. You might want to pick one or two of those and see if you can become exceptional at it. And those things you're already exceptional at. Well, to me, that creme de la creme stuff is my favorite application of this intuition stuff, because when you're already really good at something, you've honed your intelligences, you've honed your skills, you've honed your mastery, then your intuition becomes a really fine-tuned instrument that can help you shape what you're about to do next, shape the form of your mastery. Because you really can't figure out what's never been done before. You can't figure out how to go somewhere that hasn't been charted. That's got to be something you feel your way into when you're uniquely experiencing the you that is you. And that's what intuition is. It's uniquely you. It's not listening to other people's voices. It's not, listening to or following anybody's lead. It's listening to the higher self inside of you. And there's no better source. There's no better place to find the truth, about you than there in your intuition, the higher self inside of you.
I'm entertaining myself here, thinking of listening to you and thinking of the phrase, so who are we talking to when we talk to ourselves. I want you to consider that there's two of you. And that's really not the best way to say it. I don't mean two distinct aspects to self or two opposite parts. I'm saying that we're a continuum, a scale, like a piano keyboard, and that we have a better nature on one end, and that's love-based, and it's full of vision and hope and optimism, and that's where intuition comes from, that higher self that you find in relaxed states, hence finding yourself in paradise. But the more common self, at least in this day and age, is down here at the other end of the keyboard, boom, 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 down the bass notes here. And this is the negative self. You know it as the ego. Perhaps personality is a word you use, or character. Persona literally means mask. So I think personality is a good word, good use of the word. Mostly who people make of themselves is invented. You present to other people some kind of personality, a persona, a character, your ego nature, based largely on fear that comes from what you don't know about the truth of yourself. And we just assemble this character and take that out into the world. That's the self-loathing voice you hear, the part that's beating you up and saying you're probably not very good. Sometimes it sounds like your parents or some other critic. And you know about the two parts arguing. You've had throughout your life this so-called stream of consciousness that at times was little more than an argument between these two parts of self. So who do you want to identify with? Because if you're a victim of intuition, if that's just something that sometimes happens to you, then obviously you're playing down here on the left end of the keyboard. You're the ego, the fear-based self. You're the one that thinks there's some benefit in being a pessimist, right? You're just being a realist and being careful. And yet you have these arguments. The higher self goes, yeah, well, what about this? Well, couldn't we do that? Well, this would be fun. Well, that would be the loving thing to do. Well, this is higher consciousness or expanded awareness. But, you know, esoteric philosophy and mythology as well is full of these stories about the battles between the ego and the higher self. The struggle on the staircase, I was going to call it once, on the stairway to heaven. The dweller on the threshold is a famous 19th century version of that. Sometimes people say that's what the Antichrist versus the Christ is, the struggle internally between the ego and its tendency to be logical, but in a real negative way. And this higher self that is so love-based, full of inspiration, and, you know, really great ideas. So to be intentionally intuitive, to turn and access that intuition, is in many ways, there are distinctions, but in many ways it's merely a decision to identify with the truth of who you are, the spiritual self, the eternal and infinite higher self that speaks as intuition. And funny thing about it, not only intuition itself, like, aha, there's the answer, what a great idea, oh, I see, solution or a goal or a result that you desire. But isn't it fascinating how it arrives, this consciousness, with a confirmation rush, a sense that a feeling that, wow, pow, zoom, and that's it. That's really it. Wow, why didn't I think of that before? That's the answer. You not only get the idea, you get the confirmation to come along with it at the same time.
One of life's great rushes. So this intentional intuition, we're saying we have to be intentional with our intuition because the stress of today's world has made intuition sort of move to the back burner. It's that quiet voice we don't hear very much when we're all stressed out. So the problem is fear has always been a very valuable thing for human beings. I mean, we've always had fear. But throughout almost all of our history, except for the most recent part of our history, the fear was of danger. We were afraid of danger. Now, recently, we have added to being afraid of danger, being afraid of confusion. And confusion's not dangerous, but it's like the fear that something bad is going to happen, the worry thing that we've done so intensely in these last, 50 or 100 years maybe? I mean, before that, it was a pretty rare thing for people to spend time in worrying much about the distant future like we do now. So this stress that we've created makes it's still fear, but we're afraid of something that's not dangerous. And so what we need to do is intentionally feel safe. We need to intentionally access our intuition, that higher consciousness, that voice that is from the better nature, the safe part of us. We need to intentionally exercise that because the confusion makes us forget to do that. So how do you intentionally exercise your intuition? It really starts with deciding to intentionally exercise your intuition, is having the intention to. So, okay, I'm going to do it. Tomorrow I'm going to do it 10 times. 10 times tomorrow. And I'm going to do it every single time I sit down at that desk, and every time I get up and wash my hands, and every time I take a drink of water. Those are the times. Have the intention of intentionally accessing your intuition. So you sit down and you say, I mean, like one of my favorites is like, how can I do something better? You know, like what's a cool thing that I could do that would make my life better? You know, what would make me happier, or, you know, anything like that. And just let your imagination riff for you. You're the Walt Disney Sorcerer's Apprentice character, and you just got this magic brush, and you can just paint that kind of exercising, which is exactly the opposite of worrying. It's in fact the antidote for worrying. It negates the power of the worry. It's sad that we have to intentionally do that because it's what we used to do almost all the time. It's normal to not do that now. It used to be normal to do that. It's still natural, but it used to be even normal, and now it's become not normal to use your intuition. Well, what we're saying is intentionally access your intuition, make it be normal for you so that you can at least offset all that negativity, all that worry, all that pessimism that just seems to come up not because we're in danger. We're not afraid of danger, really. We're afraid of confusion.
And we're going to show you how to do this in a matter of minutes. But, Steve, on 2 different occasions in that discussion just now, you said it didn't used to be like this. You said it in both ways. People didn't worry as much as they do now, and it used to be normal to think positively and dream and fantasize about being more creative, what could be, you know, sort of a receptive creative state where you don't really try so hard to assemble ideas. You just sort of sit passively and wait for the emptiness or the silence to be filled, and lo and behold, it often is.
Of course, it's only some. There's uninspired people who spent their life in boredom, punctuated by moments of anxiety, and inspired people spent their life in fascination. So there's always been both. But the worrying thing is a pretty recent phenomenon in terms of spending most of their time there.
Well, since it puts such a damper on our intuition and sort of reinforces the whole victim mentality anyway, why do you think that's so? What was it about the 19th century or pre-industrial revolution, or at least pre-computer age, that made people more optimistic? Why did they worry less, do you think?
Again, I don't think there was as much to worry about, you know, is really what it comes down to. And that their life was in the moment, struggling for food or else enjoying the, you know, experiences that they can afford to enjoy. I don't think people spent nearly as much time worrying about a whole lot of different things because they didn't have 4 checking accounts. You know, they didn't have a stock portfolio. They weren't concerned if the garbage man was coming on Tuesday. They were taking out the garbage. Now, you know, taking out the garbage is not something you worry. It's something you just do, you know, when the garbage is piling up and there's nobody to come take. So I think there was much more chop wood, carry water. There was much more experiencing the life they were living, gathering food and growing food or whatever they were doing, and much less. You know, I'm sure as we move from the nomadic hunter-gatherer where we thought maybe a day ahead, you know, and into the farming age where we started thinking months ahead kind of thing, I'm sure some people started worrying more as we moved from the hunter-gatherer to the... And people started worrying even more as we moved from the agrarian age into the Industrial Revolution, and even more as we moved to the computer revolution. Again, more stuff to worry about. But it never, I don't believe, before the industrial evolution, certainly, and probably more like the computer age, this last century or so, that did it become the predominant thought form for most people.
So you're saying basically as humanity evolves and moves from these various stages of the development of civilization, and civilization became more complex and thinking became more complex, people worried more. Plus, in the first part of that, you said people were losing access to control, it sounds like they were becoming less hands-on. It's one thing to gather the wood, to build the fire, to cook the food. It's another thing to put a frozen dinner in the microwave. And you might say, well, I have more control over the microwave in the TV dinner, but you really don't. If the microwave breaks, what are you going to do?
Or if the truck taking the microwave dinner to the store breaks, or if the store burns down, it's all out of your control.
All these, yes, exactly, variables or possibilities, and then you have worry, right? So a lot can be said for voluntary simplicity, relaxing, slowing down. In many ways, you will become much more efficient, much more productive, and the quality of what you do will go up when you slow down, because it's a matter of not more is always better. It's a matter of balance. What's the most appropriate point on the scale?
Right, and often it's slow down, and sometimes even if it's go fast, as John Wooden said, go fast but don't hurry. So you can even go fast and slow down, When you go fast and hurry, then you make all kinds of mistakes. But you can go fast, something you know how to do really well, you can do that quickly. But to do it in a Zen-like way and not in a rush kind of way, yeah. And what we're talking about is the idea of living intentionally with your better nature. Not just hoping in retrospect, you go, oh, yeah, well, I knew it was against my better judgment to do that. But really, like, checking into your better judgment before you leap. Look before you leap. Intentionally use your intuition to check out, now, is this a good idea? Just because something's logical doesn't mean it's a good idea. Just because it makes sense and intellectually sounds like a good idea doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea. For example, if it hurts somebody or scares the heck out of somebody or injures, insults somebody, just because it was a good idea doesn't mean it's a good idea, So just because something is a good idea intellectually doesn't mean it's really a good idea.
Or the right idea.
To implement. That's where your intuition can come in. It can be either jump ahead and look, what's an elegant way of doing this thing in a new way? I get up every morning to an alarm clock. I don't like getting to an alarm clock. I don't, by the way, but I never did. But if somebody, what's a more elegant way of doing that? And let your intuition tell you, guide you to figuring out a better way of doing it. Almost any time you read, like in a book of suggestions or hypnosis or anything, and they tell you how to say something, if you come up with a way to say it in your words, it'll be better. It'll work even better for you. So your intuition knows the right way to say things to yourself. So use your intuition to ask questions like, how can I be better? Do I have any talents I'm not even paying attention to? What do I really want the most in the whole world? The biggest questions you're going to ask yourself, why am I here? What is it all for? You can't figure those things out. There's no book that can give you the answer to those. But exercising this amazing intelligence called intuition, right or wrong, it's still a great muscle to exercise.
Let's contrast it to logic and talk a little about logic so that you can be better, more knowledgeable at distinguishing between these voices in your head or these pictures or these sensations. Again, everybody relates to the thought-feeling process through different senses. This whole science has been called neuro-linguistic programming, the way ideas are represented and organized according to your physical senses. Well, you also have imaginary senses that correspond to every physical sense. You can imagine seeing, and that's visualization. And you can imagine hearing and smelling and tasting and touching and so on and so forth. Now, Logic, on the other hand, does not rely on the senses or sensations. We think of it as being intellectually pure and mathematically sound, but basically logic is deductive in nature. There is such a thing as inductive logic, but it's used by most people as a crutch. It's like, if this is usually true, then that's probably true. That's sort of inductive nature. An extension based on some anecdotal story, or it's usually a stereotype or a generalization. But there is value to inductive logic. But the vast majority of logic is like algebra or simple subtraction, where you eliminate what you do not want. That's what logic is. You factor. It's Sherlock Holmes, right? Well, it was logical, my dear Watson, elementary. This couldn't be, and that couldn't be, and there was no way this could happen, and therefore...
Eliminate the impossible, and anything left, however improbable, has to be true.
Well, there you go. That's the way he said it. That's logic. Ordering from a menu. You think you're deciding what it is that you want to eat by looking for what you want and choosing it. The actual process that you may not be aware of is you're eliminating unconsciously what you do not want. In most cases, maybe it's a restaurant you've been to a bunch of times, you don't even look at the menu. But, let's say you're traveling, you're in a new state, a restaurant you've never been in before, big menu, you open it up, what can you do except begin deducing, eliminating? Well, it's logical that it's 4 p.m. and I'm really not in the mood for breakfast, so that's out. All right. Lunch, no, I want a little more to eat than that. Dinner, let's see. Could have a big salad. No, I had salad yesterday. Eliminate that. Maybe I'll have a side salad. Not sure. Put that in the on-deck circle. We'll take a look at it later. The parking lot, as they say, right? And you go through this whole process of narrowing down, just like you factor or do algebra, eliminating variables, and you get it down all the way down to X equals the chicken salad sandwich, right? Or balancing your checkbook. You've got $1,000, you spent $200, you've got to deduct that, and then logically we have $800 left. Okay, so that's the logical approach to thinking, and it works with math, and it works with ordering off of the menu. It's reasoning. It's pretty much all people have. Now, creativity, you could say, is recombining what somebody knows that they know in a conscious fashion. But intuition, this is more emotional, really, than mental. At least for me, it arrives emotionally, and I feel it in my body. I don't feel my thoughts in my body. I feel my physical feelings and my emotional feelings in my body, and I feel intuition in my body. So I think of it as an emotional intelligence. And the one thing I know about emotional intelligence, call it intuition or anything else, it arrives when you're most safe and relaxed. Further, I think we should talk about this a little too, Steve. Intuition is not instinct. Both are called gut feelings. But intuition is experienced in the heart area, or aspiring to the heart, the upper abdomen, if you will, whereas instinct is the lower abdomen or even the groin. All right, so when George W. Bush said, there's a truthiness about it, or I just go by my gut, and I have a feeling about it, that instinct is very different than a heartfelt intuition. Okay? Even the gut instinct is really more or less your logic with a bias. It's almost like an argument, a so-called gut instinct. It could be like an animal instinct, like, okay, boys, it's time to all go south for the winter, right? Or mating instinct, or this herd mentality The lower you get on the spine in terms of the center of feeling, the more animal-like it becomes. So that's instinct down there, bottom of the abdomen, the groin, often negative, often trying to avoid what you do not want. And intuition is moving toward what you do want. That's more love-based and felt up higher in the rib cage. And then logic up in your head. So think about logic as that deductive process, and then intuition is much more passive. It's relaxing, breathing. We'll walk you through it here in a minute. And opening yourself to that light, to that sound, to that insight, to that revelation, illumination. One of my favorite words for the whole process is realization. I like that.
Yeah, intuition, whatever name, whatever guise it goes by, it's really listening to that higher self, that higher consciousness voice. You know, a couple of times that come to my mind when I think about using intuition. One is to discover your own paradise, to find out the place inside of you that makes you feel safe. We call it paradise, narrow awake, the alpha brainwave state. You can't figure that out. You can't, there's no menu. You can't, pull down, well, let's see, it should be the mountains, and, it's got to be 72 degrees. You don't do that. You just, let it emerge, you just let it come up for you. And it can evolve, my first place I ever came up with when I was 8 years old was this beautiful meadow in Yosemite. It was like a memory picture of that, and this babbling brook. I needed the sound of the babbling brook, and then these 3 deer drinking out of that babbling brook, and because the deer were there and they didn't run away, the meadow had to be safe, so even part of my logical mind was working then, and over the years it evolved, and now it changes seasons sometimes, or time of day. Sometimes it's dawn, and sometimes it's dusk. And now, once in a while, it's got this beautiful rainbow over it because it reminds me of Maui. It can evolve, but I don't figure out how to do that. I just let it happen. Just like every one of the shows that either Michael or I come up with the topic for the show. We don't figure. There's no menu we can pull from. We just look around life and close our eyes and think, what would be a good thing to talk about this time, and come up with something, Intuition, the more you exercise it, the more it's there for you. Again, you don't have access to it when you're stressed. Well, so actually women do have more access to their intuition even when they're stressed. When men get stressed, they really lose access to their intuition. It's so fascinating because when men and women get stressed, they get affected by the same stress chemicals and the same stress hormones, but the way those chemicals and hormones act on estrogen is the opposite of the way they act on testosterone, because when men get stressed, they're doing this fight or flight thing, and they go out to kill, and when women get stressed, they come in to protect. It's just the opposite behavior. So it's really kind of interesting because women need their intuition even when they're stressed, and men give theirs up for extra superhuman strength and speed. So I like to say in my seminars, when a man and a woman get stressed and they get in an argument, he says something stupid, he quickly forgets that she remembers forever, So it's not a level playing field anymore. But we all do have access to our intuitions when we take even one conscious deep breath. That's all it takes to bring it back to any man to get back into that place where he's going to think before he blurts. All it takes is one conscious deep breath to have access to that voice, that intuitive voice. And again, it's there. It's often there, and you don't hear it because the other voices are louder. So you got to quiet yourself down to actually hear it. Or you can make it louder by asking for it and paying attention to it. But it's there all by itself if you'll quiet your mind down. And that's what we're talking about. Again, the world's not dangerous, but there's so much fear in people's lives because we've confused confusion with danger, and we're afraid of confusion. Well, confusion's not dangerous. It's just something you don't understand. And if you breathe deeply and realize, there are things that you can control and there are things that you can't control. And what I'm going to do is not try and control those things I can't control. I'm going to control the things I can, which is how I perceive what happens to me and how I respond to it instead of just knee-jerk react. So the more I relax and listen to my intuition, the more my better nature comes through, the more I find myself in paradise, the more I consciously, purposely, intentionally exercise my intuition. The more I offset the worry, the more I offset the confusion, the more I allow myself to blossom and flower.
A couple of times in the last few minutes, I've made reference to who are you talking to when you talk to yourself, who's talking to whom here. And I described the polarities of the ego or persona at one end. I talked about the left end of the keyboard, and this higher self, the intuition corresponds to or represents, or the higher self speaks intuitively to us, we might want to take a little deeper look at where all this comes from. Is this information that is somehow a creative reassembling of things we've already known that then burst from the unconscious into awareness? Or is this something that comes from outside of us, perhaps the plane of our own overshadowing soul, some spiritual portal that is accessed? Or a religious person might say, well, Jesus told me. And many people are clear about being in communication with God. And not merely religious people, but mystics and so-called pagans from the pre-prophet era. Everybody in those days that was spiritually oriented at all, whether they were shaman, medicine men, or just your average day Joe and Mary, the consensus around the world was that people had a responsibility for finding their own alignment, often through nature, with their spiritual source. And that source was often represented by a feeling of love and an experience of light. Love and light. You see it in all religions coming through again and again. The holidays at December, where you have not only Christmas, Christ representing the light and the love of the world born in a cave, or Hanukkah, which is a festival of lights because the lamps kept burning even though the fuel should have been used up long ago, another kind of light, right? Or the solstice, so-called New Year's, midwinter, where the days are starting to get longer now. Mehr Licht is the way Goethe wrote it once, just more light. That's what we're all looking for, enlightenment. And so, again, the feeling of comes the dawn, or the light bulb pops on, or bam, you just so enlightened all of a sudden, right? Go for that. Go for the light. It's a perfect contrast with shadow and darkness, which represents fear. And then you'll see the relationship of love to light. Love is, at least in part, I can see into the shadows now, and there's no danger there. So that absence of fear is peace and love, right? We often think of love only as romance and emotion, or the way you feel about your parents or your kids or your pets or something. Love throughout history has had a much greater set of meanings, including this relationship to light and feeling safe, and that's love. It's like, well, we're safe now, right? Everybody's gathered around the campfire, and, well, we're all protecting each other and feeling pretty safe. I love you, right? So this idea of light, again, why wait for it? Why play victim to it? Why hope that you're going to get a good idea? Like, I always get good ideas in the shower, so I need to take more showers, and I'll get more good ideas. What you need to do is relax the way you relax in the shower, or stop thinking so critically the way you do when you take the dog for a walk and have a good idea. Replicate those states where you're enjoying a lower level of stimulus. That's when the light comes in. The more stimulated you are, the more you multitask. The more you worry, the darker it's going to be. All those unknowns are going to create a block or a resistance to your intuition. You have to account for that, release that, and then turn and orient yourself toward your better nature. We have to challenge also this idea that there is some safety in worry, some safety in expecting the other shoe to drop. That's something you learned as a kid. You can give that up. Once you understand the self-fulfilling nature of the mind, you're going to have to let go of the idea that there's some safety in expecting a negative. You're going to create that negative or contribute to it, increase the likelihood of it by trying to avoid it. We talk about the Sonny Bono principle. Everybody knows what Sonny Bono was thinking during the last few seconds of his life. It was, I sure hope I don't smash into this tree. Right? Here he is zooming down the ski slope. He fixated on what he didn't want, and even though he didn't want to hit the tree, he was obsessed with looking at what he wanted to avoid and instead created it. That's the opposite of intuition. Reorient yourself consciously. Breathe, relax, turn toward the light. Isn't it odd that we try to create a feeling of safety by counseling our fears, but we're afraid to feel safe? That's just simply backwards.
It really is. I mean, pessimism is illogical. I mean, to get sick and tired of what has never transpired, it doesn't make any sense at all. One of the most important times, I think, to access your intuition, to intentionally use your intuition, is the process of falling asleep. Here's a place where people often worry, and worry sets up a worse night's sleep, whereas at this point, you've laid your head on the pillow, however long it takes you, 5 minutes for some, 25 for others, but whatever it's going to be, intentionally start to think about good things, like best-case scenario thinking. I love best-case scenario thinking. Like, what would be the most wonderful thing I could do to enhance my marriage? Like, right now, and don't try and figure it out. Just see what comes up. And you'll find yourself going down different trails. You'll find yourself leaving that topic altogether and going somewhere else. Einstein said logic takes you from A to B, and imagination takes you everywhere else. So it's just keep it in the positive vein, and use this energy, intentionally use, so that your better judgment voice comes in. Now, if there's no other time to feel safe in your life, before you go to sleep is the best time to feel safe, So let the ego voice, the worry voice, it'll wake you up in the morning. It'll be there in the morning for you. Let that one go and intentionally access the optimism voice, the intuitive higher self voice, the quiet one that whispers, sounds like love, feels like joy and passion. Let that voice come through. Ask yourself, what's the best case scenario for this situation? And what's the best case scenario? What can I do to enhance my friendship with my best pal? We've had this friendship for so long. What's something cool that I could do? And just ask yourself questions like that and let your intuition come up with answers. It's a wonderful exercise. Even if you don't remember the stuff in the morning, it doesn't matter because you had a really good time and you put yourself into a wonderful, wonderful pathway as you move down to a much more positive and beneficial sleep.
So let's practice some intentional intuition here. Without going to sleep, just finding that nice floating place where your awareness is alert, but your body is resting very peacefully and still. That's when the mind is at its best. A balance, this side of sleep, obviously, and yet quiet without 100 thoughts competing for your attention. First, get comfortable, shake off any tension. Some shoulder shrugs and head rolls is a good idea. Sit back in the chair so you can allow, if you wish, the back to support you, but sit as straight as you can with shoulders back and open your rib cage and just take a few slow, deep breaths to get started. Through the nose is a good idea. Big, nice, full, deep breath. And as you exhale, create and sense a feeling of letting go.
As you feel that letting go increase, it comes with it a sensation of peace. Peace and letting go. Together they grow. More peace. More letting go. As you find, through your intuition, this peaceful place in your mind. Imagine yourself in a peaceful place, a calm, serene, and quiet space. You may see or hear or feel or know, but be there. And let the feeling grow of being safe. Safe. in this space, safe in this place of peace, which you created intentionally with your intuition. And I have a very strong suspicion that if you allow your mind to wander, you can make absolutely no blunder. Anything you do will be right and true. Wherever you go, you'll find. Intentionally accessing your intuition is a wonderful experience for your mind.
And so, when you repeat this exercise, you bring with you one particular area of interest or concern. And so I'd like you to do that now. Choose one aspect of your life where you'd like some insight, some understanding, if not the complete solution or resolution to a problem. Well, how about a big piece of it? And as you choose that one particular area, imagine holding it gently and offering it up for consideration. How does that feel? And then you sit receptive and passive. You don't reach, you don't make demands or commands. You request, you petition, and sit receptive, passively, focused on your intention to be open intuitively. And that part is unwavering. Think of yourself as a channel that's tuned, carefully calibrated to exactly the right frequency as you feel how it feels. Imagine even magnetically drawing toward you through laws of attraction and electromagnetism, good ideas, insight, conceptual understanding, the bigger picture. Here it comes, like a memory you thought you'd lost, but then there was the tip of the tongue, and then it burst into your awareness. In the same way, this new information, this idea, this realization, this revelation, this inspiration, coming like light with a wonderful feeling that only you can describe. Hold that anticipation around this particular idea gently and wait.
You don't have to hope or effort or try. You just allow. Just imagine it in your mind's eye and allow. And you'll find your intuition will guide your mind. So intentionally access intuition. Imagine, for example, what it would be if you knew the kindest thing that you could do for a member of your family. Somewhere inside, that information can come if you ask and just allow. Ask yourself, what's the kindest thing I can do for this one that I love? And it'll come to you somehow. That's intuition. It's so special and amazing and fine. Ask, look, seek, and ye shall find. So instead of just waiting for intuition to pop, take a moment here and there. Whatever you're doing, stop and access your intuition. Just ask and wait and see. It's the first thing that pops into your mind. It's so easy when you're relaxed and feeling safe. you set your intuition free. So remember, to ask and listen and hear. Intentional intuition will come through loud and clear.
And now, as you become ready to return to the wide-awake state, tell yourself this information will be easy to remember in all of its detail. And the consequences, the implications and ramifications will continue to unfold all by themselves as today becomes tomorrow and the next day and next week. And hold that expectation, that set of instructions with you gently as you remember the room you're about to see. Reorient yourself through the sound of our voices. And inhaling now, a nice big deep breath, fill your lungs. Hold as you peak, and now as you exhale, relax. And open your eyes wide awake, alert, rested, back in the room, feeling fine, all recharged and energized, and even better than before.
Yeah, and better than before is something that you have to define, and the way you do that is you ask yourself, what would be even better than before? Intentionally utilize your intuition. It's such an amazing tool, and it's really one of the easiest ones to use because all you have to do is be quiet and then ask a question and listen, and it's the first thing that pops into your mind. Sometimes it's a picture, sometimes it sounds, or just a feeling, or a combination thereof, but seek and thee shall find. It'll come unbidden, it'll come by itself sometimes, but you can go get it anytime you choose.
And as we come to the end of this year, 2011, you could be listening to this program at any time in the future, but it's getting near the end of the year, so happy Hanukkah, Mele Kalikamaka, Merry Christmas. We did this last week too, but make sure that whatever holiday you're celebrating, as I said earlier in the program, they're all about light, more lights, whether it's Hanukkah or Christmas or solstice or Happy New Year. And so we hope the new year is good for you, and wherever you are in your life, whatever stage of your life, it's becoming ever more clear to you that things really are getting better and better and better, and you have everything to do with that. If you want to play victim, you could, you can, you have in the past. Everyone tries that out. And you get a little bit of sympathy. You'd really rather have love. Sympathy doesn't quite do it after a while. It's nice that people can feel sorry for you, but wouldn't you rather turn all that around and become the self that you can find in paradise? Thanks for your interest and support in 2011. We look forward to more great programs with you in 2012. Hope you'll tell your friends, especially those that are looking for information on self-awareness and personal empowerment. And as always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui, Hawaii.